Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back to today's DAF, Bava Kamma DAF Pei Daled. We are on Pei Gimel Amud Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines off the bottom of the Amud. So, if one injures another fellow, the pasuk says, "Ayin tachas ayin," an eye for an eye, which sounds very literal. But the Gemara, with the power of Torah Sheba'al Peh, expounded upon the true meaning of these words. It doesn't mean literally you're meant to remove the eye of the perpetrator. Rather, it triggers monetary liability. He's responsible to compensate the victim for his injury. How do we know this is true? So the Gemara today will present many sources presented by many Tanoim in various Braisos regarding the exact meaning of the Psukim. Says the Gemara Tanya, so first of all we have Rabbi Yehuda ben Yehuda. He has a Braiso like this. Rabbi Yehuda ben Yehuda Omer, Ayin tachas ayin, which sounds literal, eye for an eye. No, mammon. It's alluding to monetary payment. You have to compensate the victim for the value of his eye. So you're suggesting it means mammon. Who says? Maybe literally, the ayin of the attacker is meant to be removed. Amr's, the response is like this. It's not really practical. Why? So imagine the attacker's eye is a large size eye. And the other way around. Let's say the victim's eye is large. The attacker's eye is rather small. So you can never get a fair matchup. So you can't have an exact formula of an eye for an eye. It's never going to be exact. So perhaps you'll say, okay, that doesn't prove that it's always going to be monetary payment rather than removing his eye. Perhaps I'll say, okay, in this case, it's not practical. So in this type of case, in this type of situation where it's an uneven equation, yeah, you're right. Will accept payment. But when you can actually fulfill the literal meaning of ayin tachas ayin, if it's exactly the same nature, then you would take the eye for the eye. Says the Gemara, you can't suggest that we have different types of formulas for different situations because it's meant to be uniform, universally uniform. HaTorah Amra Mishpat Echad Yelachem. It's one way to approach all these liabilities. Mishpat Hashav V'Lekulchem. We have one single formula applying to all situations. Not here it's the eye, here it's payment. So the only way that it can work out universally is if it's always going to be payment. Amri said the question was no. My kushya, what's the question? Dilma nahira shakal minei, nahira shakal rachmana nishkal minei. You're asking about uneven eye size. That's not how it works. It's eyesight that we're speaking about. Dilma nahira shakal minei. The fact is, he eliminated his eyesight, right? And that's what we do to him. Nahira amrachmana. Torah says the actual eyesight nishkal minei will take away from the attacker. Unrelated to eye size, because otherwise you'll run into another issue regarding a murderer, right? Imagine a small-sized man, a midget. He kills a big person, physically big person, or or a large man struck down a small man. What happens? We put the attacker to death, right? It's chayiv misa. How could we? It's not fair. It's not an equal equation. How do we kill him? Right? HaTorah Amra. So there it's not going to work out. Because Torah says nefesh tachas nefesh, right? So we take the attacker's life because he took the victim's life. But if they're not, same size, not the same, how could you do that? So you'll tell me, well, okay, in that case, when it's unequal, we won't apply misa. Only when it's exactly equal and fair, but otherwise we won't. And it's not an option. Because Torah says all cases are treated equally. HaTorah amra mishpat echad yelachem, right? Mishpat hashav l'kulchem. Else you must say that it's not about body size. Neshama shakal minei, neshama amrachman mishkul minei. He took away this person's life, so we take away his life. We don't look at the physical properties of the person. We look at the the spirit, the life. Hachanami, same thing with the eyesight. Nehayra shakal minei. He took away the function, the actual eyesight, and therefore we do likewise to him. Nehayra amrachmana. Torah says nishkal minei. We take away his eye function. So perhaps that's a very simple formula, and even if it's literal, ayin tachas ayin, it will make sense. So we can't really prove anything from here. Tanya Idach, we have a different source. Comes Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and he says like this. Omer, he says, ayin tachas ayin mammon. An eye for eye doesn't mean an eye for eye literally, it means he has to pay up. Ata Omer mammon, you're saying it's mammon. Maybe it means literally his eye. It can't be. Harei shehaya suma. Suppose the attacker himself was already blind, Visima, and he blinded the other fellow. Or Kiteya, he was missing his arm, Vikita, and he did the same to the victim. Chigir, he was already lacking in his walking function, he was limping. Vichigir, he did the same to the other person. So in this case, you cannot respond in kind, he has nothing to give, right? Heichani mekayim bozeh ayin tachas ayin. You can't apply ayin tachas ayin to the letter, literally, because he has no eye to give. He's blind to begin with. And once again, we run into that same issue because the Torah says we treat all cases equally. So, if this literal approach will not work in this case, it's not going to be mishpat hashav l'kulchem. So apparently, it's all about payment, which can apply in every case. Amri. So the response was, who says? Umay kusha, what's the kasha? Dilma heicha de efsha efsha, heicha de la efsha la efsha, upatrin le. This whole point of that there has to be an equal judgment and a universal formula. So you cannot say sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's payment. You know what? Fine. When you can do it literally, maybe it means literal. When you can do it, fine. Otherwise, he's off the hook, he's potter, fine, we don't do anything. Because otherwise, you're always going to run to this type of issue. Because sometimes you cannot punish. Imagine a person who has a critical wound. He's slated to die in the near future. And he kills a regular, healthy person. We're stuck, we can't kill him. You know why? What are we going to do to him? Rashi explains. Because even if the murder was reported by Edom, we can't accept their testimony because the halacha is that in order to deem the testimony of witnesses as valid testimony, it needs to be reported by Edom who have the potential to become Edom Zoymimin. Theoretically, if somebody would come and disprove their testimony and undo their whole report by presenting that they were not even present at that time and in that location, that makes them Eidim Zemimin, and we do to them as they have attempted to impose on this innocent person. In this case, it would be Misa because they were trying to get him killed. But if they were doing it to a Treifa, who in any case is considered halachically like he's not considered a fully alive person. A person kills a Treifa, he doesn't get Misa. So the Edom who tried to kill him are not going to get Misa either. So this concept of responding in kind and imposing on the Edom Zemimin what they attempted on to impose on this person, which is death, it wouldn't apply in this case. So the whole Edus doesn't work, right? In order for an Eid to be valid, he has to have the potential, the capability of becoming an Eid Zemimin with all its consequences, which doesn't apply by a Treifa. So if a Treifa kills a person, you can't accept the test, you can't believe the Edom who are reporting this story. So bottom line is, he'll get off the hook. he'll be butter. We can't do anything to him. So clearly, in some cases, the attacker gets off the hook. Oh, so apparently, we're realistic. We're practical. When we can do something, we do something. Otherwise, not. We're particularly exempt. So basically, we disproved our entire proof, attempting to substantiate this halacha that ayin tachas ayin means payment. Here comes another source. Tue May Rabbi Shmuel Tan Amakra. The pasuk says. Pasuk begins by saying, "Look, you attacked your friend. Shever tachas shever, ayin tachas ayin, right? Kasher yitein mum ba'adam, just like he inflicted a mum, an injury upon this fellow. Kain yinasan boy likewise will be applied to him. Kain yinasan boy sounds like you're giving, you're handing it. Nasina ve'ein nasina elam amain. It's referring to monetary payment, money which you hand over. Elamiyata, if that's the case, then nasina always means monetary transfer. Kasher yitin mum ba'adam. So when the pasuk says, well, kasher yitin mum ba'adam, right? Then it says kain nasan bay. Now, the first mention of yitin is going on an actual injury, an attack. Kasher yitin mum ba'adam. Hachanami de mamenu. Over there also means he gave him money? No, of course he attacked him. So here as well, kain nasan bay maybe means the same. That we're going to, respond in kind. We're going to injure you. Amrit Rabbi Shmuel. So the answer is Rabbi Shmuel, who presented the source. Kro Yisera Darshi. Their explanation is based on an extra, sort of a seemingly unnecessary phrase in the pasuk. That's what the drasha is based on. Michti ksiv ish kiiten mumba mitai. The pasuk already says, if a person inflicts injury, kasher asa ken yasa lai. Just as he did, will be done to him. Kain yinasen boy lamali. Why did the Torah add kain yinasen boy? Shmamin amamin. Apparently, to add this point that it's about payment. So now kasher yitin mum ba'adam lamali. Let's go back to the other pasuk. If nesina always means something that you can hand over money, so kasher yitin mum ba'adam sounds a bit like, why is the pasuk referred to a physical attack as yitain? You're right. Normally, either the boy, the michtav, kain nasan boy. Torah used, symmetrical language because it was about to say kain nasan boy that he's going to be required to pay compensation. Kasav nami, Torah chose a similar language when it said kasher yitain mum ba'adam, and of course it means two different things. Yitain mum ba'adam means a physical attack. Kain nasan boy means monetary obligation. Here comes another source. Amakro yad b'yad. So once again, these are psukim regarding injuries and punishments. So actually, it's going on the edim zaymimin, like we mentioned before. So we're going to apply to them just as they had intended and plotted on imposing on this innocent person. And the pasuk goes through a listing of shein b'shein, yad b'yad, regel b'regel. So they go through everything that they try to do. Yad b'yad means davar hanitain, hanita miyad liyad, maniyu moment. It means something that you hand over payment. Elamiyat regel b'regel nami, hochiu. Well, the same pasuk mentions regel b'regel. So, there are two ways to learn the pasuk. We apply physical damage to the edim zaymin, just like they are intended on doing to this fellow, yad b'yad. And regel b'regel means the same thing. We injure their regel in exchange for this regel. Well, you tell me yad b'yad means something that you hand over, so it means that it means monetary payment, right? So let's say they testified that Reuven chopped off Shimon's hand, they have to pay for it, right? Because they had, they were attempting to have Reuven have to pay for it, so now they have to pay for it, so apparently it's all about monetary payment. But when it says regel b'regel, you don't hand money with your foot, so over there it sounds more literal. Over there also means handing over money. So just like over there, perhaps it doesn't mean monetarily here as well. Says the Gemara, Regel b'regel nami achihu. No, Amri dver b'chia kro yiser kadarshis. The answer is that dver b'chia, the source of this drasha, weren't based on the actual explanation of the translation of the words. It was just because it was an extra pasuk. That extra pasuk triggered this new explanation. Michti. Let's take a close look. Ksiv, the pasuk already gives you this general umbrella, this general formula. Okay, whatever the Edom Zayman plotted, we do to them. Finished. Mamish. So if it's all about literal meanings, yad b'yad lamali. Why does the Torah have to stipulate yad b'yad, regel b'regel? We understand whatever they try to inflict on this person by having bezdin chop off his arm because he did it to his friend, right? If that's the way we work, so that's it. Just state briefly. We do to the Edom Zaymin what they intended to do to the other person. Why do we have to go and stipulate and enumerate yad b'yad, right? Lamali, what's the point? Shmamin amamin, to tell you that it's about monetary payment. So it's the extra expression, the extra phrase, which highlights this new meaning. So then why does the Torah continue enumerating regel b'regel, right? Lamali, what's that for? What's that coming to teach us? You're right, it's just, a mode of expression. Once it started with yad b'yad, they just went through the listing. I did yad b'yad, so it says kasav nami regel b'regel without any real additional, deeper meaning behind it. Abaye Omar. Abaye had a different source, that it's all about monetary payments. We learned it from the Bryce taught in the Beis Medrash of Chizkiah. The Tan of the Chizkiah, ayin tachas ayin, nefesh tachas nefesh. So the pasuk speaks about eye for an eye, a life for a life, and we learn from here that it's only one for one. V'lo nefesh v'ayin tachas ayin. Right? So, if he's responsible for hurting the other person's eye, right, we don't do two things to him. We don't apply punishment to the eye and also to the nefesh. Right? A person gets one punishment. Now, that proves that it's not to be taken literally. Why? If an eye for an eye means mamish, and we remove his eye, this can very well lead to the attacker getting punished a double punishment. His eye and his life. Why? Perhaps if we choose to remove his eye, this might actually result in killing him. That's not what the Torah meant. He's not meant to get a double punishment. So apparently it's not literal, it's payment, which avoids this danger. What's the problem? We're not going to get to that point because we appraise him in advance. Right? We make an appraisal. We estimate whether he's able to tolerate this punishment. If he can tolerate it, we do it to him. Otherwise, right? We know that his body's not going to hold up, he's going to die when his eye is removed. If he can't tolerate, we don't do it. So who says we're ever going to get to this point of killing him? And you're right, and if we estimate that he can live through it, and we try it, and for some reason accidentally he dies, it's not our issue. If he dies, he dies. Don't we have the same idea by lashes, by malchus of the bezdin, which can very well kill a person if it's overdone, right? If it's more than he can bear. So the bezdin evaluated his condition, and ultimately somehow he died, from the malchus, which we figured would be within his realm of bearing. Potter, so the bezdin is potter, the shneich is potter. So here as well, we can still establish a formula that works, even if at times accidentally you can go overboard. So perhaps again it means literal, not monetary payments. We don't really have a clear proof from this pasuk. Rav Zvit Mishmei the Rabba Amar. Here's another source that it means monetary compensation, not literal punishment, physical punishment. Amar Kro Petza Tachas Petza. So the pasuk speaks about all different types of, responses. We do the Kviya Tachas Kviya, Petza Tachas Petza, Chabura Tachas Chabura, right? So what's the extra pasuk? Petza Tachas Petza, wound for a wound. Litain Tsar b'Mokim Nezek, to tell you that even if he's going to pay for damages, we still add another layer of payment, Tsar, pain. So he has to compensate for the actual pain. Now, doesn't that prove that the attacker will not have to experience the same physical injury as the victim? Because otherwise, he's having the pain as well. Why should he have to pay for it? He's fully paid up. If it means mamish, just as the victim experienced tsar, so the attacker is going through the tsar as well. So why should he have to go pay an addition? Oh my Krishi, what do you mean? Tsar is subjective. It's relative to the situation. The person, maybe a person is more finicky and more sensitive, will have a greater pain experience. A person doesn't have that sensitivity. Lastly, tsar doesn't have that much pain. And what would be the difference? The attacker has to give him that difference. Let's say the victim experienced, we evaluate the tsar that the victim experience was greater than the tsar of the attacker. Maybe we have to give him that difference. So again, there's no right. Rav Papa Mishmei the Rabba Amar, he has another source. Amar Krova Rapi, same concept. Pasuk speaks about adding another layer of liability. He has to pay for the victim's doctor bills, his medicines. Litin refuah mokim nezek, even though he's paying for the nezek, he has to pay refuah. Again, the same point. If we actually apply this physical einish to the attacker, well then why is he paying for the refuah of the victim? He himself has to do refuah for himself. So that's his suffering, that's his einish. Just as he needs a doctor, he also needs a doctor. So he's all paid up. He's getting his full punishment. My kushi, what do you mean? Maybe there's a difference between the way he recovered and he recovered. Maybe in some cases the flesh, heals quickly. Haya means quickly. And the victim never had to suffer for a much longer time, and his doctor bills were higher. And the point would be the attacker has to give him that difference. I have a source that all these liabilities are monetarily. Why? We learn from Gzera Shava, from the shoyer who attacked. By a man who attacked, ayin tachas ayin, eye for eye. And by the shoyer, by the animal who inflicts injury and damage, it says shalim yishalim shar tachas hashar. So we have the lashon tachas in both cases. We connect them. We say ma lahalan mammon afkan mammon, just like by the animal which attacks, you just pay. Likewise by a person who says my chazas the alphas tachas mishar. I understand that you have a kabbalah to make a gzera shava. Who says we connect it to the shar, which results in monetary liabilities? Nay live tachas mi adam. Let's apply gzera shava with tachas, but connect it instead of the shar to the shar. We connect it to the adam who attacks another person, and over there it means literal. In the case of where a person murders somebody, right? A life for a life. So we have tachas in a literal context. Ma'al mamash, just like over there it means mamash. Afkan mamash here as well. By injury it means mamash. Amr, the answer is done in nizakim. In nizakim we prefer connecting injuries to injuries, damages to damages, human damages to animal damages. As opposed to learning damages from murderers. Totally different, realm. Adarab, just the opposite. Done in adam. I prefer connecting a person who attacks and injures from a person who attacks and kills. Ve'en done adam rather than learning a person from an animal. Elamar Avashi. Here is the source. Mitachas asherina. We have the word tachas. When a person attacked, and over there, it's monetarily. When a person interacts with a woman forcefully, so he has to go and he's penalized financially. And we have the word tachas. So yolav le adam adam, one azikin. Here we go. So we connect a person who injures his friend, where it says tachas, so it's a person against a person, and it's injury-related experiences. We connect it to the tachas asherina, which likewise has both those elements, it's personal and it's injury. And just like over there, it's monetarily, here as well. Tanya B'lezo Eimer, another source, ayin tachas ayin, mamash. Actually, he seems to disagree. We literally respond in kind. Mamish. How can you suggest it means literal? You mean Rabbi Lezer doesn't hold on this whole Amud Gemara, less like Chalani Tanoi, all these sources presented by the Tanoim? Marabba, no, Laimar just means to say Shein Shomanoi Sekevet. Of course it means payment, but we don't appraise the victim like an Eved, right? Yesterday we learned based on Rashi, how do we evaluate the value of a person's injury and the value of the person? The person is priceless. We picture as though he would be an Eved, sold in the street, sold in the market. So Rabbi Lezer disagrees with that. So we treat him like, we place a price tag on a free man. I mean, like how are you going to evaluate his value? Since when does a regular free person have market value? All Rabbi Lezer meant to say was like this. Of course, it's about issuing payment. And of course, it's about evaluating based on market value. But who are we evaluating? So Reuven attacked Shimon, removed his eye. So the eye is gone. Now, are we looking at Shimon's devaluation or Reuven's devaluation if he would have had his eye removed? It's not about the victim, So basically, the point is that Torah is allowing the mazik to compensate, to exchange his eye, which should have been removed. Should have been removed because he did this to his friend. Instead, he pays up. He pays the value. He sort of redeems his eye. So it's about the attacker's value, and that's how he gets closure. Says the Gemara, there was a story of a donkey, the kata yada l'riyuka, who removed the hand of a child. So they came to Rapapa. Amar lahu, so he told them, Zilu, shumulei abo advarim. Okay, sit down and figure out all the 4 payments that the animal owner has to pay. Amalei Rava, why only 4? It should be 5. Va'anan, chamisha tanan. We have 5 payments in the Mishnah. Nezek, tsar, ripui, shevas, and boishes. Amalei levar nezek. I mean, of course, I meant on top of nezek. Nezek plus 4. Amalei Rabbi, but it's an animal. An animal doesn't trigger these payments. V'chamayru, right? V'chamayru, any mishalma nezek. When an animal attacks, it's only about nezek, not the additional payments. Amar Luz, he says, you're right. Zilu, shumal, and iskei. You're right. Let's just, figure out the nezek, and that's all it's going to pay. Says the Gemara of Hoka of the Boilim Shaimei. But once again, in order to really get to the true, value, you have to treat him like, you have to, picture that he's an Eved being sold. You're right. Amar Lu, he says, yeah, you're right. Again, Zilu, Shamu, Ka'avda, based on Eved value. Amar Lu, Avudi, Nukas, the father of his child, says, no, I don't want my child to be viewed as an Eved and taken to the appraiser. Lo Baina, the Zilu, Bemosa, I don't want it's degrading for my child. Let's skip the whole process. Amar Lu, they told him, it's not in your hand, it's the child's money. You're depriving the child of this payment. Amar, she says, don't worry, the gadol, when I'll get older, if I ask him, I'll give him some, I'll pay him off from my own, in order to appease him and satisfy him without having to go through this whole degrading experience. Says the Gemara, who Tura, there was this shoyer, the Allah Siyad Nukad chura off the hand of a child. Aslan went to Rava, they came to Rava, Amar Lu, he told him, Zilu Shamu Ka'avda, you have to pay based on Eved value. Amar Lei, so this was, of course, in Bavel, right? That's where they lived. So they responded to him, V'hamaru da Amar, you yourself taught us, Kol Anishim Be'eved. Whenever the situation requires this, slave, evaluation, in which case it's not a clear value, you have to, go and appraise it. Ein goyven oiseh bebavel. These types of payments cannot be collected and imposed in Bavel. I think more later we'll discuss, why some things were done in Bavel, why not. But ideally, these things should take place in Eretz Yisrael because there they had the Dayanim Mumchim, the expert Dayanim, which were certified, which were Smuchim, and they can apply all the halachas of Choshe Mishpat, all monetary damages and payments. But not in Bavel. They're limited in their ability to carry out these monetary judgments. So you don't do this in Bavel. Amar Lucy says, you're right. The whole point of evaluating and determining value is the tafas. The tafas. We don't impose the actual payment. The Bezdin doesn't. But if the victim decided to somehow grab, he got a hold of the attacker's money, he can hold on to it, and that's the point of setting value. So that if he grabbed his money and it corresponds to the value which was coming to him, he can keep it. So even though we don't get involved, but if he took the matter into his own hands, he happened to have his money, he can hold on to it, provided it's the proper amount. Tue May. So Rava, who's saying this, is following his own opinion. Rava tells us like this: some things we do in Bavel, some things we don't. Niske shur, a damage that occurred to a shur, bishur, which were inflicted by another shur, or v'niske shur was damaged by Adam through a person. So these types of payments, we allow them to be collected in Bavel as well. So we impose these judgments in Bavel, provided these are animal injuries, injuries which occur to an animal. But injuries that occur to people, which aren't really common and are more complicated, niske Adam, that happened through a person, Adam, or v'niske Adam, injuries occurring to an Adam through a shur, b'shur, these are not acted upon in Bavel. Why? What's the difference between these two and these two? Why don't we proceed with judging, injury cases pertaining to a person victim? We can't do it. Elohim be'inan. We need Elohim. That's the lashon of the pasuk describing the certified dayanim. We don't have that in Bavel. So likewise, if an animal got injured, niske shar b'shar or b'shar b'adam, nami. It also comes from the same source. Parshas Mishpatim over there, right? Elohim be'inan, which requires certified dayanim. But we don't have that in Bavel. So you must say that when a shur is harmed, so even we in Bavel can carry out these judgments. Why? Although we're not really certified, because the dayanim in Eretz Yisrael are very pleased that we're their agents. We're sort of representing them. We're sort of like a sub-bezdin of their bezdin, under their authority. And we can carry out these things as well. We do it all the time. Let's say a person, admits to monetary liability, we can go and act upon it. Voice, people lend each other money. So these things are common occurrences, and we couldn't conduct business if we weren't going to be acting upon these things. So apparently we have the authority to do it. We're authorized by the Dayanim in Eretz Yisraal, Seir as well. Adam Mashar Nami, all these cases, let's carry it out because we're sort of representing the Bezdin of Eretz Yisraal. Midadahav, just like the standard cases are Hidas voice. So again, what's the difference between a shor who was harmed or a person? Amri's, the answer was like this: when do we carry out the shlichus? Things which are clear, which are set. But damages which aren't so clear, they're not clear-cut situations. Right? We need appraisals and evaluations. So these are complicated, and we're not authorized to deal with that. Says the Gemara again. What's the difference? Amris, the response to this answer was shor b'shor b'adam nami. So even when an animal is injured, whether it's through a shor or through a person, on the spur of the moment, we can't necessarily peg an amount, a value. We go and check out the marketplace, right? We see what a shor is being sold today in the market, and based on that, we figure it out. So Adam Mashar Nami, same with a personal injury. Let's go take a look and determine based on the market, the slave market, right? So that's the first question. What's the difference? Another point, Tashlum Kefil, the Tashlum Bava Kamma, right? The double payment, the Tashlum Bava Kamma, 4 or 5 times as much which the Ganav will pay, right? So these are pretty much set, determined amounts, right? The kitzi. So why don't we do the shlichus there? And we all know that in Bavel we never apply the 2-fold and 4-fold, 5-fold payments. These are knasses, these are fines. We don't do that in Bavel. So it's all about determined and predictable amounts, so why not? Answers the Gemara, you're right. B'knasa le'abdina shlichus sayu. When it involves fines and penalties, these aren't standard, litigation cases, and when it comes to these things, we were not given the authority. Well, okay, that explains the kefil and the Bava Kamma, but Adam ba'Adam, but let's say Reuben attacks Shimon. That's straightforward monetary payment. That's not knas. So let's carry it out. We only do it b'milsa the shchicha, regarding common occurrences, because otherwise, like we said, things will just, community life will just fall apart, right? But Adam ba'Adam le'shchicha, how often does a person attack somebody, So that's not something which is common. Le'abdina shtichusayu, we're not authorized to do that. Says the Gemara, Haribosh Bava Kamma, Navish shtichusayu. The Bach takes out Pagam. So basically, embarrassment, personal embarrassment. Unfortunately, it's something which is common. So when it comes to that type of, payment and compensation, we should do that even in Bavel. Amri's response was like this: Hachinami, it's true, we do. There was a story where a person inflicted grave embarrassment on his friend, and Rav Papa went ahead and compelled him to pay 400 zuz, even in Bavel. Well, says the Gemara, that didn't really hold up. We don't hold that Rav Papa. Why? The Shalach Rav Chizda. Remember, Rav Chizda sent a response to Rav Nachman. So he asked him how much, and Rav Nachman responded, Chizda, how can you do this? Knasa kamagbis b'Bavel. You're trying to collect these payments in Bavel. So apparently, even Boishes, which is pretty much, direct compensation for the experience, he called it knas. The Gemara in a minute will explain why. Why is it called a fine? Rather, the point is like this. In Bava, we only act upon things which are common and involve monetary loss, literal monetary loss, real damages. Something which is common, and involves monetary loss. But let's say you have something which is common, right? Let's like boishes, right? But it's not reflective of an actual monetary loss. Right? It's an emotional grievance, but it's not kiss or inami the other way around. Something which is not common, kiss, even though it involves monetary damage, like a case where a person was injured by another person or by a share. That's not something which is shchiach, even though it's chesaron kiss, but it's not shchiach. So in all these situations, unless it perfectly qualifies, it's common and it's a literal damage, and right, which are sort of bread and butter situations, clear-cut situations. Anything more complicated than that, we're not empowered to do that. And the Gemara explains, so therefore, in the case where Reuben attacked Shimon, it involves chesaron kiss, but since it's not something which is common, we don't do it in Bavel, and likewise, boishes, embarrassments, even though it's something which is unfortunately common, but again, it doesn't have the other component, even less chesaron kiss. Okay, that pretty much covers everything. So anything except for real, bread and butter situations, haidois, halvois, predictable, set, situations, or damages occurring to property and to animals. So those are the only things we do in Bavel. Asks the Gemara, okay, really? V'shar governed by Bavel? V'shar attacks another shar, we act upon it even in Bavel. Rava tells us, shar shehizik ein. We don't do it. Ein go even I see a Bavel. Now the azik man, who do you attack? Either with the azik adam, you attack the person. My area shar the azik adam. Why discuss an animal attacking a person, which is really uncommon? Aside even a greater chiddush, something which is even a bit more common, and we still won't do it in Bavel. I feel adam the azik adam nami ein go even a person attacking another, we don't do it in Bavel. Elapshita the azik shar. So apparently, when we spoke about a shur being mazik, it's a shur attacking another shur. Uktani. And Rava tells us, Ein goyvin oisei b'Bavel. We don't do it in Bavel. Why not? It's shchiach. Animals, right? And chesaron kiss, it's got all the qualities of that qualify the payment in Bavel. Said the Gemara, Amri, the answer was like this. Ha'asam b'tam hacha b'muad. In a muad situation, where the shar is habitually doing this, so it's pretty much straightforward, you pay it in Bavel. Rava was speaking about a shor tam, first, second time around, where he's, not really liable. And Rashi brings the Gemara back on DAF Tesvav. You recall the Gemara speaks about Palga Niska Knasa. So the Chatzi Nezek, the 50% payment that the tam pays, is not it's not considered actual mammon. It's not literal compensation, it's a knas. Because really, it's just his first, second time. He shouldn't really have to pay this. It's just a knas. We fine him in order to ensure compliance. So, once again, if it's a knas, that doesn't apply in Bavel, right? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? But Rava told us that it's not possible for a shor to get to the point of mud. He can't graduate. Because if you don't have the tam phase in Bavel, you can't get to the mu'az. If you're not phase 1, you're not phase 2. Amri, the answer was the Yaid Hassam. Oh, it was a strange case. The animal became a mu'ad in Eretz Yisrael. And then he was imported to Bavel. So you can have a shor mu'ad in Bavel. Hold it, but this is very uncommon. And just told us something which is not commonly found. You just told me we don't do it in Bavel. The Asra Rabban and the Hassam v'yadu. Okay, let's change the case slightly. The animal attacked once and twice, and the Dayanim of Eretz Yisrael, who are certified, actually came to Bavel. They were here, they were visiting, and they were the ones who applied the mu'ad title to the animal, because they can sort of bring him through the process of tam and then to mu'ad, because it's a knas, they're empowered to do so. That's what happened. That's how you can have a situation where a shor he achieved the mu'ad status even in Bavel, because it was processed by the Dayanim of Eretz Yisrael, happened to be here. Well, how common is that? It's a very unusual type of circumstance. So once again, we're back to the question. It's not a common thing. You've just told me that when it comes to uncommon occurrences, we don't act upon it in Bavel. So bottom line is, how does a shor have to pay when he attacked another shor? Says the Gemara, you know how? Rava tells us that you can have a shor attacking a shor, triggering payment even in Bavel, instead of using his horns, which runs into all kinds of complications with tam and mu'ad, no, straightforward. He stepped on something. He shoved. He body shoved. Shein v'regel. Shein, he chewed, he ate. These are mu'ad from day one. These are ordinary, typical animal functions, right? And if he steps on something, or he eats something, he pays 100%. It's a mu'ad. So these are mu'adim, these are common. Chesar and kiss. Bingo. So in Bavel, we collect for these things. Okay, let's summarize the shtickle Gemara. The bottom line is, we have many sources that a chayvel b'chaveroi will not be responded to physically, literally, in kind. Rather, it's about monetary compensation. In Bavel, we only collect when the situation is classified as shchiach and chisar and kiss. Says the Gemara, and not a knas. Yeah. Fine. Tsar. So, how do we evaluate actual nezek? That's about, market value of the evet. What about tsar? Inflicted pain and damage. He has to pay for that too. Says the word tsar, shalei b'makom nezek mishtalim. Mantana. The Mishnah indicates to us that even if he hurt him without leaving behind, physical mark, he burnt him on his fingernail, so he didn't actually physically injure him, he just hurt him. You have to pay for that as well. How do you know that? Who says this triggers payment? Maybe only when there's physical damage. Mantana, who's the author of this halacha in the Mishnah? Rabbi ben Azai. It must be ben Azai, and not Shitas Rebbe. There's a machlokes in this regard. Ben Azai, the Sani Rabbi Aimer. So before we begin, there's a pasuk. Kviya tachas kviya. A burn for a burn. Petza tachas petza, a wound for a wound. Chabura tachas chabura, once again, a wound for a wound. So, what do we learn from this pasuk like this? Rabbi Aimer kviya nemr tchila. Ben Azai Eimer, Chabura Nemer Tchila. What does this mean? What's the machlekes? What's going on? Rabbi Savar, Kviya de les bechabura mashma. The words Kviya tachas Kviya, a burn without a visible wound. That's what it means. So you pay for that as well, because you pay for pain. Comes the pasuk back and says like this: Kasar Rachmana, no, Chabura tachas Chabura. Chabura is something which leaves behind an actual, a physical wound, a physical mark. Chabura means ligluya Allah the Kviya, to reveal, to explain, to expound, and translate for us that although it said Kviya, don't think it means just pain. The Kviya is b'chabura in, only if it comes along with visible injury, then you pay. Iloi, but otherwise not. So according to Rebbe, the second part of the pasuk, Chabura, reveals to us, explains to us that it's all about pain with injury. Otherwise, you don't pay. Uben Azar, he goes the other way. Kviya, the starting point of the pasuk, Kviya means the ispa Chabura mashma, a burn with a wound. Comes the pasuk and says Chabura. No, only Chabura means with a wound, but the words Kviya at the outset of the pasuk meant a burn without a wound, and even that you pay for, because you're paying for a pain. Ligluya Allah, to reveal to us that the words Kviya, the Kviya means the less b'chabura, without a wound, you still pay for pain. So Red Azai is the one who says you pay for tsar even when there's no nezek. Maskal Rav Papa asked on this explanation, the way we explain the Brisa, resulting in Ben Azai being the Shita of our Mishnah, which was composed by Rabbi HaKadosh. So it's a little bit odd that Rabbi HaKadosh would present an anonymous Mishnah, you pay for pain even without injury, when he himself disagreed, right? Maskal Papa, the other way around. If anything, let's reverse the opinions. Let's switch the names and explain their words differently, in a way which will result in Rebbe requiring tsar payment even when there's no nezek. Rabbi Eimer Kviya Nemer Tchila. The pasuk begins with Kviya. So he holds Savar Kviya is b'chabura mashma. Kviya typically comes with a burn, comes with a wound. I would think only then do you pay. No, Kasar Rachmana Chabura. So pasuk comes back and says Chabura, to tell you the Chabura involves injury. Ligluya la the Kviya, and this tells us that Kviya mentioned earlier, the less b'chabura, even without injury, you pay for pain. That's Rabbi Shita. Ben Azai disagrees. Ben Azai Omer Chabura Nemer Tchila, that the Lashon Chabura, the beginning of the pasuk, will ultimately mean only with an injury, because he holds Savar Kviya the less b'chabura mashma, and the pasuk begins with Kviya means even without a wound, just a burn. Pasuk comes back with Chabur L'Gluya Lo the Kviya, to tell you that Kviya means only when they're both together. The Isba Chabur in, only then do you pay. Iloi, without injury, Lo, you don't pay for pain. And when Rabbi Ben Azai said their formulas, Rabbi says Kviya Nemer Tchila, Ben Azai says Chabur, it means that's ultimately going to be the real meaning of the pasuk. After we sort of work out all the words of the pasuk, ultimately, according to Rabbi, Kviya means a burn without injury, just for pain, and Ben Azai disagrees. Inami, another way to learn, the Kuli Almo Kviya, the word Kviya means with or without physical injury. Bain the Isba Chabura, a burn with an injury. Bain the less Chabura without an injury. Mashma. Can mean either way. So what's the machlekes about? V'acha b'chlal uprat hameruchakim mezemezek miflaki. The pasuk begins Kviya. Kviya can mean with or without injury. Klal, a general term. Pain with or without physical repercussions, right? And then we have Chabura, which sort of specifies via physical injury. That's a klal followed by a prat. The problem is it's not immediately followed because there are words in between. Typically a klal and prat are right next to each other. That presents the klal and prat formula. But here we have Kviya, then we have the words petza tachas petza, which sort of come in between the Kviya and the Chabura. So the klal and prat, was speaking with their sort of distance from each other. That's the point of the machlekes. Can we sort of connect them into one formula or not? Rabbi says no, you cannot connect them. We can't apply this formula, and therefore we don't have to limit it We don't have to say the kviya is only when it conforms to the specific description further down the pasuk chabura, which means with injury. No, even a burn without injury. But azay savar, no, we connect them into one formula, into one package, and the prat, the specific expression, which is chabura, which denotes physical injury, is really coming to expound upon and explain and detail to us what kviya, which is the general expression in the beginning of the pasuk, had in mind. Only if it pertains to physical injury. So bottom line, only physical injury, visible injury triggers payment. Asks the Gemara, according to Rebbe, he pays whether or not there's physical injury. So why does the pasuk even mention physical injury? Why do you need that extra words? Once we know from the word kviya that it means either with or without physical injury, you're always going to pay. So what's the point of the words chabura? Chabura lamali. L'damim yisayim, to add another layer of payment. Not only for the tsar, but if there's a chabura involved, you pay tsar and nezek. Okay, bottom line is, chayvil b'chaveri pays up. He pays nezek, which is based on the victim's market value, according to Blazer, the attacker's market value. Interesting, dissenting opinion there. And then we have all these payments, nezek, tsar, ripu, shevas, and boishes. And according to our Mishnah, tsar is whether or not there's physical impression. All the best to you, and atzlacha rabbah.